Welcome to the Bringing Hope Home podcast. We're Bryce and Colette Schaefer, pastors, teachers, and madly in love empty nesters. We invite you into our home as we candidly share faith-filled, practical ways to build a strong and lasting marriage.
All right, well, welcome back to Bringing Hope Home. And we're Bryce and Colette Schaefer, and today we have some special guests with us on our podcast. They're friends of Colette's that she met a couple of years ago, and so I'd like you to introduce them to our family.
This is Peg and Rick Arnold, and Peg and I go back, how many years has it been?
Is it 220 and 2020, I think? I think it's 2020.
Yep, it was 2020. We met at a conference that was online because of 2020, and we were both winners of a book. And somehow we all got together and became this, we call us the Sisters of Grace.
That's right, you do.
And so we just connected. It was a God thing. And so,
And friendships have blossomed ever since.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. They have continued. It was divine connection.
Yep.
Yes, it was. So thankful for it. So we're excited to have you guys here today. I know you do marriage ministry. And you've done it in your church. And so we'd like to just get into that a little bit more. So just tell our listeners about you, about your ministry, anything else.
Okay. Well, I think we should first start. We met in college as RAs in the same dorm. We'd been married for 47 years. Whoa. I can't believe it. I can't believe when that blows out of my mouth, you know? And we started learning about our marriage through marriage enrichment weekends and weekends that we went on as a couple when we were early married. And then we got into leading marriage groups after we started having kids, parenting groups and marriage groups. And today we still lead a small group through our church at least twice a year. And we mentor premarital couples, and we walk them through a premarital preparation for marriage program and talk to them about what's coming up.
Yeah, that is awesome. And
we open up the what's behind the roses and the dreams.
Right.
We call it exposing your backpack or your luggage that you've kind of hidden,
Those little couples, they have rose-colored glasses on, for sure. So, but we want to dig in today and talk about expectations. And so that's one of the things that, as a young couple comes, they might have some expectations already from what they grew up with. And so if you could just speak to that, when you have a couple come to you and they have these rose-colored glasses on and these expectations, let's talk about that a little bit and what you've seen.
So expectations are one thing that in all of our marriages get us in trouble, because when we have expectations, we are thinking really solely of what our dreams are. And our expectations a lot of times don't take into consideration maybe the differences of our spouse. One of the expectations that you like to talk about
is that our upbringing is totally different on the rules of when you do your chores. Mm-hmm. And that comes into when you live together, all of a sudden you've got expectations. Well, being the oldest of six, mostly all boys, Mom, when we got home from school, Mom says, get out of the house and burn that energy. And Peg grew up, get your chores done and do everything. Well, when we come together, without talking about it, my expectation was, hey, she asked me to do something. As long as I got it done before I went to bed, it was done. And that's not the way she was raised. And there's some conflict that arose because of that.
And it's things like that where we assume things that are going to happen the way we've been brought up or the way we've experienced them in the past, but our spouse comes in with a completely different experience. And if we don't talk about it, and a lot of times you don't know that you need to talk about it until you're at each other's throats.
or it builds up over time because you haven't talked about it, and then it just explodes. Yeah.
Because a lot of times it's those little things, right? I know when we were first married, he was expecting his mom would always get up first in the morning and take
Right.
a long time
She
to get
liked
ready.
to
She
just
liked
doll
me.
herself up and take time with coffee or whatever.
And so he was expecting that of me. Well, I get ready really quick in the morning. And so I'm like, well.
And she wanted to be second sometimes. So we had, a little pushing match to push somebody out of bed first.
Right, right.
It's just those little things.
Those little
It's the little
things.
things, but if not talked about, they.
Right.
And we thought we had it all together, and that's what most couples do. And they think about those expectations, not even knowing about it. And then that can lead to some broken expectations, which then that frustration can set in. And that's what you don't want in a marriage, where the devil can get a foothold in any of our lives, but especially a family situation and a mom and dad.
That is so true, because when our expectations aren't met, the first place we go is assuming that our spouse is either intentionally trying to hurt us when our expectations aren't met. And so we are assuming negativity from our spouse. And one of the things in Philippians 4:8, it says, fix your mind on it. It's talking about our relationship and our mindset in life on things that are pure and praiseworthy, lovely, admirable, noble, true, trustworthy, and excellent and right. And if we fix our minds on the positive, those things that are true, and assume positive intent from our spouse, that if they clean the kitchen and they forgot to do the stove, that it wasn't a negative intent to not follow through with what we asked for, but it was they were trying to do their best. And if we assume positive intent, it can make our interaction on talking about that disappointment a lot more, we start on a better foot than if we go in with a negative blaming game and shaming game. And that's something we do, is we'll blame and shame them because our expectations weren't met.
Yeah, because of our frustration and what we want. And again, it goes back to me, myself, and I. And that's in a marriage sometimes to get over that, for sure. And then
there's often time where she would ask, would you clean the kitchen? Well, I'm not trained in that growing up, but I do my best. And then she wouldn't say anything, but yet I see her cleaning it right behind me. And I'm thinking, did I not do a good enough job, or it wasn't up to her expectation? So communication has to occur to understand, what level am I missing here?
Mm-hmm. And it comes back to the key in a lot of marriages and getting over the frustration is communication, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Communication.
Yeah, so give us some communication tips if you have any in expectations that maybe you've run across in the years of coaching families, and so go ahead.
Well, one of the things we like to start on a baseline with communication is a story of an experience that we had. And we were empty nesters by the time we had this experience. But the experience gave us an aha moment in communication. So you want to start?
Sure. Just set it up. We were driving in a convertible, and we had the top down, and the snow was melting, and we were driving on a country road. So it was really curvy, windy, hilly. And so I'm driving, and I went over this little hill, and I said to Peg, I said, hey, did you see that duck? She looks at me and goes, duck?
I saw the chicken.
And I went, what? The chicken had an orange beak.
It had a red crop.
Honey, it was waddling.
It wasn't. It was going like this and pecking.
I said it had 3 little ducklings with it.
3 little chicks with it.
Well, we passed the point where I could show her, and we're driving down, and I'm thinking, You're trying to convince me that that was a chicken?
And I got so mad. I said, I am not a stupid woman. I know the difference between a duck and a chicken. You know, so we're arguing.
I said, I'm turning around. She goes, yes, you are. We turn around and we're still bantering back and forth. I said, I'm going to show you. And we drive over that knoll and I pointed. I said, stop.
And I said, that's a chicken.
Same yard.
In the same yard, there was a duck with 3 little ducklings by the side of the
Where
road.
my perspective was.
He's looking at the road in this perspective. And I'm looking at the countryside and looking at the broad perspective, and up near the house was a chicken with 3 little chicks. We laughed so much, we had to pull off the side of the road. But as far as communication,
we were both right.
We were both right. And so many times we argue in a marriage, and one person is looking at it through this lens, the other person is looking at it through this lens, and we don't bother to try and find out the lens that our spouse is looking at. And so one of the first steps in communication is being able to say, what perspective are you looking at it, or knowing how your spouse thinks? You know, some of us are analytical thinkers and some of us are big picture thinkers, and knowing how your spouse thinks and say, well, I see the big picture as this and I see the analytical as this. If you share that, and you find that you can both have completely different answers and different ways of approaching things, and you're both right. So then where does the compromise? So discovering what positions you both are at and then working towards that compromise.
Yeah.
So first step is knowing that we look at things through different lenses.
Right.
Second is discovering that lens, then compromise it. But before you compromise, you have to have the desire to have the best for your spouse.
Yeah, the
And not-
intention is positive.
And not a selfish attitude that I'm going to get my way in this. That before we compromise, you know, God said that we love others as we love ourselves. We need to love our spouse as God loves them, you know, and be able to want the best for them. So that loving is a consideration, that loving is a sacrificial love, that loving is to want to have the best for them and not put our needs first.
Yeah, that's
And then when you do that, then you're in the mindset to compromise.
yeah.
Amen.
Yeah, that's huge. Perspective is everything. And, you know, as we talk about expectations and communication, all of the things that we deal with in marriage, it is all on perspective and coming with that God idea of putting others first, right?
Yeah.
And putting your spouse first and upholding them and respecting their point of view, you know, and having some of these conversations, right?
Right. And being okay if it's not your way. That sometimes is just as hard, I think. You know, I've always liked it this way. This is what makes me happy and feel good. And
Right.
so that's the way we should do it. Well, again, sometimes it's not about you. And
Yeah, you're right. Well, in marriage, it's not about you. and we get married thinking it's all about us because we married the other person because they make us happy and because we love them, you
Right.
know?
Yeah. You throw kids in
The other thing is, go ahead.
Oh, I was saying you throw kids in the mix, and boy, does that even change.
Oh, it does, because you're trying to be able to communicate and the parenting expectations that come into place, then that confuses it even more. One of the things that we teach in a parenting class is, even if it's only 15 minutes a day, to carve out 15 minutes a day to touch base with each other, to still maybe and to put your marriage first. It's so easy for the needs of the kids to come in and take over because they have urgent needs.
Yep.
So everything seems important and urgent when raising kids. But what we do is we put our marriage off to the back seat as not urgent. And and to carve out that time, even if it's 15 minutes. Like one couple we know from our class said to their kids, okay, you're going to go and take quiet time in your room. Mom and dad are going to sit on the couch. That's a signal that, that we're having our quiet time together. And so they choose that, or right after they put the kids to bed, they sit down and they have time to talk. But even if you have to set a timer and give your kids those lights, that are blue until it's time for them to come out of their room, and then you turn it green, whatever tricks you can use to give yourself that time on a daily basis to, touch in and say, hey, we're on the same team. Are we okay?
If you don't do that throughout your raising of the children, you are not experiencing expectations and learning of each other. So when you're an empty nester, you look at each other and you have no clue what's going on with each other. And that's where a lot of couples suffer, is that they just don't know what they're expecting. It's like a learning all over again, and they don't want to do that, unfortunately.
Because it's easy to get in the parallel roles of parenting well together, but forgetting that you're also a couple. You're also a husband and wife. And that needs to be strong. They say that triangle with husband and wife down here, the closer we get to God, the closer we become as a married couple, the closer we become as a unit. The other thing is using communication skills with each other. We tend to be much more respectful and considerate of those people outside our household. And we forget that we need to use the same skills with each other. One of the premarital couples came in and we started talking about, reflective listening, where you're listening to understand, not to respond.
What I heard you say was,
yes, and it may sound very odd at first when you start to practice it. By reflecting, you're able to truly understand and sit in your spouse's shoes to see their point of view. We were talking to this couple, and they both looked at each other and said, well, I learned that in this class. And she said, well, I learned that in this class. And I said, and have you tried it as a couple? They both put those skills as that's how they were to communicate with people at work, or communicate with people that they were in groups or leadership with. And I said, those are foundational for your marriage, and you already know them. And so to start practicing those, attentive listening, putting down our phones, these are the biggest distraction in a marriage, because a lot of times we're listening like, and that's not attentive listening. Right. So using those listening and those communication skills are really important when talking about the kids, when talking about things that are hard for you, when sharing something in your past that might be shameful or painful with your spouse, so that they can understand where you're coming from.
Right. So many couples feel like their marriage should just be easy and you're in love and it just happens. But as we're talking, it takes a lot of intention.
Well, one of the things on expectations in a marriage, something simple, is when she hands you a grocery list and you go shopping with that list. And I come back and there's discussion over, that's the one I wanted, this is the size I wanted. It's like, okay, well, where did we mess here?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of, I have to go over everything. Are we talking 1 can, 28 ounces, 48 ounce can, sport bottle?
What you read your mind? Come on.
Well, that's, and it's funny how that will occur in a lot of marriages. And so we've learned to dialogue. What I hear you say is that you want me to get a jar of mayonnaise, or what are you using it for, or what brand, cheap or expensive, So I go there, I don't have to listen to a commentary on my shopping skills.
Smart man.
Exactly.
Smart man.
Now,
yes.
You guys have been married how many years?
47.
47. So what are some traits that nurture a strong, lasting marriage? Just really quick to wrap this up.
Traits, one is wanting the best for your spouse. wanting to be able to honor them with your actions and your words so that they can be the best that they can be, whether as you're, in return to you or out in the world.
Pray together. There's a lot of intimacy in praying together. Even if it's just a short sentence or whatever, practicing. But when you are vulnerable like that and sharing the Lord, it is very, very helpful, because those are precious times that you can share deeply.
Not harboring things that make you angry so that they build up. We call it gunny sacking, not throwing things in this gunny sack that just all of a sudden then come out. Being able to find time to talk about it. And a lot of times, if it's a hard thing, rather than expressing it in anger, log it in your head and then ask them permission to bring up something that's sensitive and it means a lot to you at a time when you're not angry. We can't figure things out when we're angry. We don't have the skill set. We are blinded. And also when we're fatigued and hungry is not the time to work on hard things. We need to carve those times out and ask permission.
Yes.
Practice positivity, because 85% of our thoughts are negative. So, like what I learned when I walked past Peg and I looked and I said to myself, I said, why is she doing it that way? Well, that's a negative. And it prepares you to be negative when confrontation comes up. So, like, next time I walk by, I intentionally thought, oh, now she's a sweet, beautiful woman. I love just being around her. And that starts to train myself to be positive in the conversation that may occur.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, that's good. Some awesome advice. I tell you what, you're listening, our listeners, you might have to go back and listen, because there's a lot of good nuggets in this to pick up. And so we just encourage you to do that. And it will strengthen your marriage for sure. So if there's a place, where can they hear more about you? I know, Peg, you have a lot of resources and different things that you do. So how can our listeners
connect with you?
No, thank you. At this point, we are official as a couple online, but you can connect with me. I have a speaking ministry, writing ministry, and I'm a drama queen for Jesus. So if you go to pegarnold.org, you'll learn more about my ministry. And it is a marriage because he supports me in every activity of my ministry.
Of all her costumes, I'm the schlepper. I'm the bag man.
So Rick is my biggest supporter, but if you have questions about marriage, if you reach out through that, there's a way to reach me. And Rick and I would be glad to be able to connect with you there.
Our hope is that each couple cherishes each other, because they're the most important people in our lives.
And if you look up Rick Arnold or Peg Arnold on Instagram or Facebook, you can connect with both of us there.
Yep, Peg has some awesome devotions on the deck. So if you want some good devotions, you can get a hold of that. So we appreciate this time, spending time with us. And it's just been a good conversation.
Right. And what we want our listeners to always do, as we say here to close out, is bring hope home to your life today.
If you're listening on the Apple Podcast app, give us a 5-star rating and drop a review. If you're listening on Spotify, give us a follow. And if you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. See you next week.